Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we're diving deep, as always, into a topic that's I think a lot of people are talking about, and that's generative AI in cybersecurity. Now, you've probably heard about AI being, it seems like it's everywhere these days, but have you thought about how it's being used to actually fight the bad guys,
Yeah.
right? The bad guys in the digital world. That's exactly what we're going to be kind of unpacking today.
Yeah, it's a field that's absolutely exploding right now. And what makes generative AI so powerful, especially in cybersecurity, is its ability to just create data that perfectly, mimics real-world situations. And this isn't just about copying data that's already out there. We're talking about generating entirely new data that reflects the complexity of, all these cyber threats that are out there and allows us to, well, to stay ahead of the curve.
So we're not just playing defense anymore.
No, not at all. Generative AI is letting us move from this, reactive security posture where we're always kind of one step behind to a much more proactive approach. And what that means is we can now anticipate attacks, we can find, vulnerabilities before they're exploited, and we can build much more robust defenses.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But how does this actually work? Like, what's going on under the hood?
So imagine if you could simulate a cyber attack on something like a power grid or a financial institution. Generative AI can actually create these incredibly realistic scenarios that, well, that allow security teams to actually see how their systems would respond, and even more importantly, where the weak points are.
Okay, so it's like we have a virtual training ground for cyber warfare.
That's a really good way to put it. Instead of just waiting for something bad to happen, we can now use AI to kind of predicts the future, right? The future of cyber attacks.
So we can actually prevent attacks before they even happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a complete game changer, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a huge shift in how we think about and approach cybersecurity. But it's important to remember that, this is just one example of how generative AI is kind of changing the game. It's also being used to generate what we call synthetic data for training AI models, which is incredibly valuable in cybersecurity, where real-world data can be hard to come by or even sensitive to use.
Okay, can you give me a concrete example of that?
Sure. So imagine you're trying to, let's say, train an AI model to detect malware. Um, you could use generative AI to create, thousands, maybe even millions of variations of malware, exposing the model to a much wider range of threats than you could ever find in the real world, right? This makes the model so much stronger and better equipped to identify real malware when it encounters it.
So it's like giving the AI a crash course in all the different types of malware that are out there, even the ones that haven't been seen before.
Precisely. It's like giving them like you said, a crash course. This ability to generate this synthetic data is incredibly powerful and really has applications in all sorts of areas of cybersecurity, from threat detection to incident response and even risk management.
Okay, this is starting to sound a little bit like, a science fiction movie.
Right.
Are we talking about AI that can think for itself and make decisions about our security?
Well, not quite yet. It's important to remember that generative AI, as powerful as it is, it's really just a tool.
All right.
Even though it's a very powerful tool, it still needs, humans to oversee it and guide it. Security professionals still need to understand how to use these tools effectively, how to interpret the results, and how to integrate them into their existing, security strategies.
So it's not about replacing humans, it's about augmenting their capabilities, would you say?
Exactly. It's about working together. Generative AI can analyze huge amounts of data, way more than a human ever could. It can identify those patterns that we might miss, and it can generate these insights that can, help us humans make better decisions. But at the end of the day, it's still up to us, the security professionals, to use those insights to, well, to actually make the decisions about how we protect our systems and our data.
Right. So it's this partnership, right, between human intelligence and artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly, a partnership. And I think it's a very powerful one, and it's one that, has the potential to really fundamentally change how we think about and approach cybersecurity.
Okay, well, now I'm really curious to hear about some specific examples of how this is all playing out in the real world.
Yeah, me too. There are some really fascinating case studies that show just how big of an impact generative AI is starting to have in, the real world of cybersecurity.
And we'll be exploring those in detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we'll be looking at how generative AI is being used to fight things like ransomware attacks, how it's helping to secure critical infrastructure, and even how it's protecting sensitive data like healthcare data. It's going to be fascinating.
I can't wait.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about how generative AI is really starting to change how we approach cybersecurity. Now I'm really excited to kind of dig into some actual real world examples of, how this technology is being used.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into some of those case studies. One that really highlights how powerful generative AI can be is involves a financial institution. They were getting hit with just tons of ransomware attacks. It seemed like it was never ending, and they were having a really hard time keeping up.
Ransomware attacks, I mean, they're terrifying. You hear about them all the time.
Yeah, they're a huge threat, and they're only getting bigger. So in this case, this financial institution decided to basically fight fire with fire. They used generative AI to build what we call an attacker AI.
So they basically built their own AI bad guy to attack their systems.
Exactly. Think of it as like a really advanced sparring partner.
Yeah.
They trained this AI to simulate all kinds of different ransomware attacks, constantly testing and probing their defenses, looking for weaknesses.
And what happened? What was the outcome of this AI versus AI battle?
Well, the results were pretty amazing. They were able to reduce the number of successful ransomware attacks by like 70%. It was a huge improvement.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it really shows you how powerful generative AI can be, right? It's not just about reacting to threats, it's about getting ahead of them, preventing them from even happening in the first place.
Right. And that proactive approach it's just so important in cybersecurity today. The
Right.
threats are just constantly evolving. Let's move on to another really cool case study. This one involves a smart city.
Okay, so we're talking like traffic lights, power grids, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. All that and more. I mean, think about the potential for chaos if someone were to hack into those systems, right? Well, this city recognized that risk and decided to use generative AI to help them secure their whole network.
So how do they actually use AI to do that?
They used it to simulate all sorts of different attacks, on different parts of their infrastructure. They were basically attacking their own systems with AI to see where the vulnerabilities were, and then they would fix them before a real attacker could find them.
It's kind of like they built a digital twin of their city and then, let loose a bunch of virtual hackers to chicken break in.
That's a great analogy. And it worked too. They
Mhm.
were able to stop a real attack during a big event. They protected the city and they protected the people living there.
It really makes you think. Cybersecurity, it's not just about protecting data anymore. It's about protecting our whole way of life.
It really is. And we can't forget about, the importance of protecting sensitive data, too. There's another case study. This one's from the healthcare industry.
Yeah, data breaches in healthcare, those are scary. I mean, nobody wants their medical records out there for anyone to see.
No, absolutely not. So in this case, they were using AI to analyze all the encrypted traffic that was going through their network.
So they were looking for signs that data was being stolen, even though it was, encrypted.
Exactly. And, generative AI, it's really good at spotting those tiny little patterns and anomalies that might indicate, that something fishy is going on. And in this case, the AI actually caught some people trying to steal data before they could get away with it. They stopped a data breach before it happened.
It's like having a digital bloodhound,
Yeah.
right? Sniffing out any sign of trouble.
That's a good way to put it. And these case studies, they're really just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many ways that generative AI is being used in cybersecurity today.
Right.
Well, for example, it's being used to combat these really advanced threats, these things called advanced persistent threats, or APTs.
APTs. Those sound pretty serious.
They are. They're like the ninjas of the cyber world, They're stealthy, they're persistent, and they're incredibly targeted. They're designed to break into systems and then just stay hidden for as long as possible while they steal data.
So they're not just looking for a quick smash and grab, they're playing the long game.
Exactly. And traditional security tools often miss them because they don't fit the usual patterns of cyber attack.
So how does generative AI help with that?
Well, it can analyze these massive amounts of data, much more than a human ever could. And it can look for those really subtle signs, those tiny little anomalies that might indicate that an APT is lurking in the system.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it is. But generative AI is really good at it. And by finding those signals early, security teams can take steps to stop the attack before any real damage is done.
That's amazing. So it sounds like generative AI is not only helping us, detect and respond to attacks that we already know about, It's also helping us find the ones that are, hiding in the shadows, the ones we don't even know about yet.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's not just about reacting either. Generative AI can also be used to build proactive defenses, like something called a dynamic honeypot.
Honeypot, is that like a trap for hackers?
Yeah, you could say that. A honeypot is basically a fake system it's designed to attract attackers and lure them away from the real systems. And with generative AI, we can make these honeypots even more realistic, even more enticing to attackers.
So you're basically creating a digital mirage, right?
Yeah.
Something to distract and confuse the attackers.
Exactly. And these honeypots can also collect valuable information about how the attackers operate, what their tactics are, what tools they use, and that information can then be used to improve overall security.
So you're not just catching the bad guys, you're actually learning from them.
Exactly. You're using their curiosity and their malicious intent against them.
That's pretty clever. So generative AI, it
Mm.
seems like it's really changing the game in cybersecurity on like a whole bunch of different levels, right? From,
Yeah.
detection and response to actually building proactive defenses and gathering intelligence.
It really is. It's an incredibly versatile tool. And there's one more area where generative AI is making a big impact, and that's in addressing the challenge of zero-day vulnerabilities.
Zero-day vulnerabilities, those sound especially dangerous.
Yeah.
What makes them so tough to deal with?
Well, a zero-day vulnerability is basically a flaw in a piece of software that nobody knows about yet, not even the people who wrote the software. So that means there's no patch to fix it, which makes it really easy for attackers to exploit.
It's like having a hole in your armor that you don't even know is there.
Exactly. And attackers can take advantage of that before anyone even knows what hit them. But generative AI can actually help with this too.
Yeah.
Well, you can train generative AI models on huge data sets of known vulnerabilities, and this allows them to kind of learn the patterns, and they can start to identify potential zero-day vulnerabilities based on things like how the system is configured or even just how the code is written.
So it's like having an AI security researcher that can, just scan code and say, hey, this looks like it could be a problem.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's like having an early warning system. It lets organizations take steps to protect themselves before a vulnerability is even exploited.
That's incredible. It really feels like generative AI is it's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in cybersecurity.
It absolutely is. It's such a fast-moving field, and honestly, we've only just scratched the surface. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll talk about some of the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead for generative AI and cybersecurity.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about some pretty amazing applications of generative AI in cybersecurity. But, I imagine there are some challenges too, right? I mean, this is powerful technology.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the potential is huge, but, we have to be realistic. We have to acknowledge the challenges and proceed carefully. One of the biggest challenges is, well, we need people, right? We need highly skilled cybersecurity professionals who really know how to use these AI tools effectively.
So it's not as simple as just, plugging in an AI and expecting it to solve all our problems.
No, definitely not. We need people who understand AI, but they also need to understand, the cybersecurity landscape, how it's changing, what the threats are. They need to be able to look at what the AI is telling them and make sense of it, make the right decisions.
So it's really about, it's about humans and AI working together, right? It's not about replacing humans altogether.
Exactly. It's a partnership. And another thing that's really important is having a plan, right?
Yeah.
A clear strategy for how you're going to implement generative AI. Organizations need a roadmap.
Why is that so important? I mean, it seems like, if you have the technology, you just use it, right?
Well, it's not quite that simple. I mean, you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, if you don't know how to integrate it into your existing security systems, it's not going to be very effective. You could even end up creating new vulnerabilities.
Right. So it's not just about the tech. It's about knowing how to use it, right?
Exactly. And that leads to another really important point, which is, how do we know if it's working? How do we measure the success of AI in cybersecurity? How do we know if it's worth the investment?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, anytime you're investing in something new, you want to see results.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. We need to establish clear metrics. What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to measure it? We need to track things like, how many threats are we detecting? How quickly are we responding to incidents? Is our overall risk going down?
So it's not just about, anecdotal evidence, right? We need hard data.
Exactly. We need data to show that this stuff is actually working, that it's making a difference. And there's one more thing we have to keep in mind. This technology, it's not standing still.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's evolving so fast. What does that mean for the future of generative AI and cybersecurity?
Well, it means things are going to get even more interesting. We're going to see even more powerful AI models, models that can handle, even more complex threats.
So generative AI, it's not a one-time fix, right? It's something that's going to constantly be evolving.
Exactly. And as these systems get more powerful and as they're used more and more, it's going to be incredibly important to make sure that they're being used responsibly, ethically.
Right. So it's not just about building smarter systems. It's about building systems that are aligned with our values.
Exactly. We need to make sure that generative AI is used in a way that, that respects privacy, that's fair, that's transparent.
So it's about using AI to make us safer, but it's also about using it in a way that protects society, protects our values.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about what generative AI is, how it works. We looked at some real-world examples of how it's being used, and we talked about some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
It's been a pleasure talking about this with you. I hope our listeners have a better understanding of just how transformative generative AI is, and how it's really shaping the future of cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway here is that generative AI,
Yeah,
it's not just some futuristic concept, right? This is real. It's happening now. And it's already having a real impact on, how we protect ourselves in the digital world. And as this technology continues to develop, I think we can expect to see even more amazing things in the years to come.
I agree. And I think it's important for all of us to stay informed about this, to keep learning, and to be part of the conversation, to make sure that AI is used in a way that benefits everyone.
I think that's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into generative AI and cybersecurity. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital world.